I transferred your inheritance to my name. I'm starting fresh, with someone younger. Someone who knows how to value me. Christopher's voice, filtered through a tropical breeze and the faint splash of ocean waves, oozed with smug satisfaction. Then came that laugh, that smug, hollow laugh I'd grown to despise. You really should have kept a closer eye on your finances, darling. His words struck like ice water down my spine, but I didn't flinch. I sat motionless in the quiet kitchen of my apartment in Envigado, watching rivulets of rain crawl down the glass. Outside, the gray afternoon pressed heavily against the mountains. Inside, 22 years of marriage were collapsing, one cruel syllable at a time. From the speaker came the high-pitched giggle of a woman I didn't recognize, young, carefree, complicit. A golf trip, he had said. Of course. You're right, I whispered, each syllable as steady as granite. You deserve it. And I ended the call. My name is Jessica. I am 45 years old, and I've spent the better part of 2 decades as a senior accountant for a mid-tier logistics firm called Grupo Armonia. I am meticulous, composed, invisible to most. But not anymore. Something ancient stirred inside me as I stared at the silent phone screen, a slow, deliberate click of an old lock turning from within. Christopher believed he'd outwitted me. That after 2 decades of lies and half-baked business ventures, he could simply disappear, with the $600,000 inheritance left to me by my late Uncle Charles and the estate tucked away in the misty folds of the Antiochian highlands. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Uncle Charles, a man forged by betrayal and ruin, had spent his final years building his fortune back brick by brick, more guarded than ever. He didn't just leave me wealth, he left me a blueprint for survival in a world of opportunists. And I had followed it with religious precision. I poured myself a glass of red wine, its crimson sheen catching the low light as if mocking the blood Christopher had metaphorically spilled. The laptop still glowed with the banking portal he'd assumed I hadn't been monitoring. I returned to the screen and typed, not like a woman scorned, but like a strategist preparing her first move. The estate and the money had been my safety net. My unspoken exit strategy. And until this moment, I had foolishly hoped I'd never need it. But Christopher's call, so perfectly timed, so catastrophically arrogant, had flipped a switch in me I didn't know existed. The phone lit up again with his name. I watched it ring, unmoved. Let him stew. Let the silence unravel him. Let the quiet become its own form of retaliation. Outside, the rain fell harder. I smiled, a small, sharp thing. Christopher had just committed the most catastrophic mistake of his life. And he had no idea. I was never the impulsive type. While others drank and danced their 20s away, I studied cash flow models and dreamed of balance sheets. I met Christopher in my final year of university. He was magnetic, full of ambition and bold visions. He spoke of empires, of futures paved in gold. I believed him. For years, I handled our finances while he chased one reckless scheme after another. His construction company, gone in 6 months. A bistro that bled money like an open wound. Cryptocurrency ventures that swallowed our savings like quicksand. I cleaned up his disasters without a word. I rebuilt what he squandered. And he mistook my silence for submission. I considered it patience. Strategy. Delayed retaliation. When Uncle Charles died 18 months ago, I lost not only my last living relative but the only man who truly saw me. Our Sunday coffees had been lessons wrapped in stories, parables about trust, betrayal, and the price of naivete. Never let your guard down, not even with the ones who say they love you most, he'd said, sipping black coffee from a chipped porcelain mug. Loyalty fades. Greed doesn't. Back then, I had smiled and nodded, humoring what I thought was paranoia born of old wounds. Now I knew better. Now I saw the wisdom etched in his warning, the roadmap hidden beneath his words. Christopher had triggered something he wouldn't be able to untrigger. There was no undoing this betrayal, no apology grand enough to erase what he'd stolen, not just the money, but the years, the trust, the me I might have been if I hadn't spent decades being small for his sake. This wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't even rage. It was the quiet, calculated ache of a reckoning long overdue. And I was ready. In the weeks following Uncle Charles's passing, I had moved quietly, deliberately, like someone tracing the borders of a war map. My confidant in this new phase was Sandra, my uncle's longtime financial advisor. She was a sharp-edged woman with a reputation for handling wealth as if it were an heirloom blade, measured, methodical, and deadly when misused. I recognized her name from a firm I once admired from afar, one that catered exclusively to clients who understood that discretion wasn't a luxury, it was armor. With her guidance, every cent of the inheritance was placed under fortified structures, trusts locked behind biometric safeguards, legal barricades, and authentication procedures that could make a government jealous. Christopher's name? Nowhere. If he ever touched a peso, it would only have been because I had allowed it. Which, of course, I hadn't. What he had likely attempted was to access our shared household account, where I had parked a sliver of the inheritance for groceries, bills, and his ego-driven whims. What he didn't realize was that the bulk of Charles's gift had arrived ahead of schedule that day, slipping into its protected vault like a whisper behind steel doors. I reopened my laptop, the cursor blinking expectantly on a blank document. There was much to be done. Christopher's betrayal, so brazen and theatrical, had provided the perfect justification to reclaim what was mine. Not just the money, my life. The next morning, at exactly 7:15 a.m., the call came. "Jessica, what the hell is happening?" His voice was tight, riddled with panic. "I tried to move the funds yesterday and now the bank says there's an investigation. They froze everything." I was already dressed, sipping my coffee with a tranquility I hadn't felt in months. "Well, good morning to you too," I replied, my tone light. "How's the golf retreat going? Catch any birdies yet? Don't play games. What did you do?" I took a slow, deliberate sip, savoring not just the warmth of the brew but the icy terror I heard blooming in his throat. "I didn't do anything, sweetheart," I said evenly. "But you, apparently tried to commit bank fraud. That tends to trip a few wires." The silence on the other end stretched so long, I thought he'd dropped the call. Then a sharp inhale. "Bank fraud? What are you talking about? I'm your husband. I have a right to that money." I let his delusion hang in the air like the morning mist clinging to the window. That inheritance was placed in a protected trust. Uncle Charles designed it that way for one very specific reason, to prevent unauthorized hands from meddling with it. When you attempted that transfer, Christopher, you triggered every failsafe in the book. You're lying. Spouses share assets. It's the law. Not when the trust is structured to exclude you. Not when the beneficiary is explicitly instructed to guard against financial predators. You remember what you called me yesterday, don't you? Darling? Just before you told me you were trading me in for someone younger? Another beat of silence. When he finally spoke again, the bravado was gone. "Can I at least explain?" "I'm sure you can," I said, setting my cup down, "but I'm not interested in the latest installment of your fantasy novel." He tried again. "Jessica, this is insane. You can fix this. Call the bank. Tell them you authorized it." "Why would I?" I asked. "Because you say we're married? Because you think that gives you a pass to steal from me, humiliate me, and then disappear to paradise with your new plaything? You're being cruel." "No, Christopher. I'm being clear." I stood, gathering the documents I had prepared the night before, each one meticulously labeled and timestamped. "I'm filing for divorce this morning. My lawyer will be in touch. You can't just cut me off, that money is mine too." "No," I replied, calm and final. "It isn't. And thanks to your little stunt, you've just given my attorney a solid case for aggravated fraud and asset protection. So really, Christopher, thank you." I ended the call. Then I turned off my phone. There were still calls to make, steps to follow. But not yet. First, I was going to enjoy the rare, steady drizzle outside, water washing away years of quiet suffering. At precisely 9 o'clock, I entered the glass-walled offices of Patterson and Associates. The same firm I had discreetly visited 3 months prior when Christopher's behavior began slipping, erratic spending, sudden absences, late-night phone calls he dismissed with a smirk. Back then, I wasn't sure if I was being paranoid or simply prepared. But now I knew, what I had mistaken for loyalty was a long, slow self-betrayal. One I was finally ready to end. And this was only the beginning. Ashley was not the kind of lawyer you hired for mild disagreements or polite negotiations. She was the type you called when blood was metaphorically on the floor, when betrayal wasn't just emotional but financial, surgical. Mid-50s, precise, with a steel gray bob and eyes that missed nothing, she specialized in the dark arithmetic of divorce, asset concealment, forensic accounting, and the quiet dismantling of those who thought they could outsmart the system. "Jessica," she said, flipping through the stack of documents I laid before her, "this is one of the most airtight cases I've seen in years. Your husband practically hand-delivered us the evidence, wrapped in infidelity and garnished with attempted theft." Her tone was clinical, but I sensed her professional satisfaction as she reviewed each piece of proof, screenshots of credit card transactions, five-star hotels in cities where Christopher was supposedly networking, champagne dinners for two, high-end jewelry that had never once graced my neck or finger. There were bank records, fraud alerts, transaction logs. I had organized them all with accountant-level precision. For once, my compulsive order served as a weapon. How did he think he could break into a protected trust without the codes? Ashley asked, raising a brow. I unlocked my phone and pulled up a familiar thread of text messages. 6 months ago, he started asking for my passwords. Said he wanted to help me organize our finances, budgeting, he called it. I never gave him anything concrete. Just vague answers, small distractions. But I had a feeling he was watching. Logging my keystrokes with his eyes. Ashley nodded slowly. So he was preparing for this for months. Longer, I said. He started asking strange questions, about Uncle Charles, about the bank he used. He pretended it was curiosity. I knew better. 3 weeks ago, I left bait. A forged bank statement, carefully planted on the desk. It showed a false account, with a balance that was significantly smaller than the real inheritance. I watched from the reflection on my computer screen as Christopher slipped into the room behind me, thinking I was distracted. His fingers danced across his phone as he photographed the page, greed shining in his eyes. He believed he was clever. Yesterday, he tried to rob the wrong account. That was never the real one, I told Ashley, sliding another folder across her polished desk. There's more, I said, pulling out a second envelope. Christopher has been siphoning small sums from our joint accounts. Nothing large enough to trigger alerts. But in 6 months, it adds up to nearly $15,000. Ashley flipped through the statements, her expression tightening. And where was it going? To an account I'd never seen before. I hired a private investigator last month. I slid over another document, transaction summaries, surveillance reports, transfers to a newly opened account in Christopher's name, one I was never meant to know existed. He used the money to bankroll his affair, I said quietly. Hotels, flights, jewelry. His mistress is 28. Her name is Margaret. She works at his favorite sports bar. Ashley didn't blink. Proof? I showed her the phone again. Photos. Videos. Receipts. My investigator had followed them to Phoenix last weekend. Christopher's supposed golf getaway was a romantic escapade under a different sun, full of laughter and betrayal. Ashley jotted notes swiftly, her pen moving like a blade. This is excellent, Jessica. With this level of documentation, we can file for adultery and financial fraud. And given his attempt to access your trust, we'll push for a highly favorable settlement. There's something else, I said, my voice softer now, as if lowering it could contain the gravity of what I was about to reveal. When I structured the estate with Uncle Charles's advisor, we included a fail-safe clause. If I ever attempted to access the trust fraudulently, or anyone else did through my identity, that person would immediately lose all claims to the marital assets. Ashley's pen stilled mid-stroke. She looked up. You're telling me Christopher triggered that clause yesterday? I nodded once. As of last night, he no longer has a legal right to the house, our shared accounts, or my retirement funds. Uncle Charles was meticulous. He always said your greatest threat often sleeps beside you. Ashley leaned back, exhaling with professional admiration. Your uncle was a brilliant man. Yes, I replied. And he taught me that preparation is the most elegant form of revenge. At exactly 11 a.m., I left her office. The city was still wrapped in drizzle, the streets washed clean. As I stepped outside, my phone rang again. It was the bank. The tone on the other end was professional, but I caught the trace of restrained amusement in the woman's voice. Mrs. Torres, I'm calling to inform you that Mr. Christopher has been contacting the institution persistently since 8 o'clock this morning. He insists that a supervisor can override the situation if he just explains himself. And what have you told him? I asked, voice cool as the rain. That any attempt to access a protected trust without authorization, she replied evenly, is a matter for the courts. Not customer service. I smiled. Christopher had spent years believing I was the silent one, the soft one. But he forgot the most dangerous thing about quiet people: we listen. We plan. We remember everything. And we never strike until it's far too late to defend yourself. We also informed him, Sandra continued, her tone clipped and professional, that his actions triggered irreversible security protocols. Only Orion can override them. I smiled to myself as I crossed the quiet parking lot and unlocked my car. And what exactly does that mean for him? It means, she said, that the attempted transfer has been escalated to federal banking authorities. His social security number has been flagged as a potential internal threat. If he tries again, it won't be a phone call from us, it'll be a visit from law enforcement. I slid into the driver's seat, heart steady, jaw set. It was better than I'd dared to imagine. Uncle Charles's legendary paranoia, once an endearing eccentricity, had become my personal shield, a bulwark forged from hard-earned distrust. He had spent his life building protections against betrayal, and now his foresight was slicing through Christopher's schemes like piano wire through silk. There's more, Sandra added, her voice a notch lower now. While reviewing internal logs, we discovered that Mr. Gomez has been making inquiries into your accounts for months. My hand tightened around the steering wheel. What did he do? In February, he contacted us, claiming to be your financial advisor. He said he was reviewing your portfolio on your behalf. He impersonated my representative? Yes. Our staff followed protocol. He was denied access, but we logged multiple suspicious attempts. There were several calls and one in-person visit. He introduced himself as your attorney. I stared straight ahead through the windshield, the wipers swishing slow arcs across the glass. The drizzle had turned heavier now, as if mourning something. Or washing it away. So he's been laying the groundwork, I murmured. This wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was a long con. Exactly. Yesterday's attempted transfer fits into a pattern of premeditation. A calculated scheme. Document everything, I said. My lawyer's going to need every call log, every fraud alert, every report. And include the visit where he claimed to be my legal counsel. They're already compiled, Sandra replied crisply. Ashley should receive them within the hour. I ended the call and sat in the silence, surrounded by the muffled hum of traffic and the occasional splash of tires slicing through wet streets. Office workers rushed past with umbrellas and coffee cups, caught in the rhythm of an ordinary day. But for me, everything had changed. 22 years. A shared life. A shared bed. And I was only now realizing that I had married a man who wore a mask so convincing, even I had fallen for it. Or perhaps the mask had slipped years ago, and I'd chosen to ignore the cracks. My phone vibrated again. Unknown number. This is Margaret. Christopher told me what you did to him. You're bitter and jealous. You don't deserve a man like him. He's never been happier than he is with me. I read the message once, then again. Calm spread through me like ink in water. Then I typed. Tell Christopher that when he's arrested for bank fraud, he'll have all the time in the world to reflect on how happy you make him. The reply came instantly. What arrest? I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the exchange to Ashley with a brief note. Proof of ongoing infidelity. Contact info for the other woman. Then I drove to Grupo Logivia. I had reports to finish, meetings to attend. Maintaining normalcy now was not weakness, it was strategy. No one in the office needed to know that my marriage had shattered or that my husband was spiraling into legal ruin. Not yet. Let Christopher flail in the quicksand he stepped into. Let him reach for the surface while I walked away, untouched. As I crossed the lobby toward the elevators, I felt lighter. Not free, not yet, but untethered. The weight of silence, of endurance, had lifted. Christopher thought he was orchestrating the perfect escape, the elegant betrayal. But what he didn't realize was that he had walked straight into a snare, one designed by a man who had spent his final years preparing for vultures like him. My boss, Matthew, leaned out of his office just as I was approaching my desk. His face was serious. "Jessica, 2 people are here to see you. They say they're from the Federal Bank Crimes Division." My heart gave a single thud in my chest, but my voice didn't waver. "Send them in." 2 agents entered, one, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the calm air of someone who had seen far too many lies, the other, younger, broad-shouldered, clean-cut, clipboard in hand like a well-armed soldier. They presented their credentials. "Agent Jason," the woman said. "This is Agent George. Ms. Torres, we're conducting an investigation into suspicious banking activity related to your inheritance accounts. We've been informed that your husband, Christopher, attempted to access protected funds using unauthorized credentials." "That's correct," I replied, closing my laptop with a soft snap. "Yesterday, he called me from what he claimed was a golf resort. In that call, he informed me, quite proudly, that he had transferred the inheritance into his own name." Agent Jason's pen hovered over her notepad. "Did he specify how he obtained the credentials?" I looked her straight in the eye. "No. Because he didn't have them. He just didn't know that yet. When I told him it couldn't be done, something in him snapped. His voice cracked, brittle with desperation, and his eyes, once calculating, began to dart like a cornered animal's." Agent George's pen moved fast, scratching down every word with bureaucratic precision. "Were you aware," he asked, "of any prior attempts by your husband to gain access to those accounts?" "No. Not until this morning," I replied, steadying my breath. "My banker called first thing. Said Christopher had been trying for months, posing as my advisor, fishing for passwords, calling from different numbers. He used every trick in the book." I paused, choosing each word with care, as if building a case brick by brick. "I should also tell you, I'm in the process of filing for divorce. My lawyer already flagged financial inconsistencies. There's a paper trail, and it's ugly." The 2 agents exchanged a glance that said more than any spoken word. Agent Jason leaned in slightly, his tone shifting from polite to pointed. "Mrs. Torres, it's crucial you understand, this isn't just a domestic dispute over shared finances. Your husband attempted to fraudulently access a federally protected trust. That's a serious offense." "How serious?" I asked, though a dark part of me already knew. "Bank fraud. Identity theft. If proven, it could mean up to 20 years in federal prison," George said, his voice low, almost reverent. "Especially when there's evidence of sustained deception." A cold satisfaction bloomed in my chest like frost on glass. Christopher thought he could drain my accounts, vanish with his little mistress, and leave me nursing my wounds. Instead, he'd walked straight into a trap of his own design. "What happens next?" I asked. "We'll need you to come in and give a full statement," Jason said. "And we'll require any correspondence you've had with him regarding the inheritance, plus documentation of suspicious activity." He handed me a business card, crisp and clinical. "Your bank has been cooperative. There's extensive proof, calls, recordings, flagged transactions." When they left, I remained in the office, staring out at the hazy skyline of Cartagena. A guiltless kind of quiet settled around me. Part of me thought I should have warned Christopher, told him the trust was firewalled tighter than a bank vault. But then I recalled his voice on yesterday's call, how he'd spat betrayal down the line like venom, how a woman's mocking laughter had echoed in the background. He'd made his choice. He'd mistaken my silence for surrender, my trust for foolishness, and my love for something disposable. The phone rang again. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Jessica, please, Christopher's voice cracked. You have to help me. There are agents, asking questions. This is out of control. Is it? I said quietly. It was a mistake, he pleaded. I panicked. About the future, the money, I got carried away. But we can fix this. Together. No, Christopher, I replied. This wasn't panic. It was strategy. You opened hidden accounts. Lied about every trip. Bled our savings to fund your little fantasy, and committed felony fraud in the process. My voice was calm, detached. Like I was reading a recipe, not handing down a sentence. The only thing you didn't account for, I said, was getting caught. Silence. What do you want from me? He whispered. What can I do? Nothing, I said, and let the word hang like a verdict. You already did it to yourself. I ended the call. Then, with the same serenity I used to schedule a meeting, I slipped my phone into my bag and walked out to lunch. I ordered a cappuccino. I smiled at the waiter. For the first time in months, I tasted freedom. 3 days later, the call came. I was slicing zucchini, the kitchen warm with garlic and solitude, when my phone buzzed on the counter. Mrs. Torres, Agent Jason said, your husband has been arrested. I set the spoon down, calmly. Where? Phoenix. Trying to board a flight to Costa Rica with his companion. TSA flagged him. He never made it past the gate. There was the faintest curl of satisfaction in her voice. I didn't blame her. Fleeing the country in the middle of a federal investigation, she added. Not the best look. I hung up without ceremony. Poured myself a glass of wine. The room was silent, steady. Then I dialed Ashley. Well, she asked. I told her everything. She laughed, a clear, triumphant sound. This accelerates the divorce timeline. A husband in federal custody for financial crimes? He won't get near the assets. His little escape plan just handed us the upper hand. I took another sip of wine and watched the candlelight flicker on the kitchen wall. Christopher always said I was too trusting. Too soft. Turns out softness can sharpen into a blade when the wound goes deep enough. There were no heroes in this story. No white knights or clean victories, only broken pieces and bloodless revenge dressed in legal terms. That night, the messages began. Margaret, his accomplice, his lover, flooded my phone with a series of voicemails, each more frantic than the last. The first was venomous, spitting out accusations between uneven breaths. You're a bitter witch, she hissed. You're destroying a good man because you're jealous and petty. By the third message, her fury had curdled into desperation. Her voice trembled now. Please, if there's anything you can do, anything to help Christopher, he's not himself. He's suffering. I listened to none of them. I deleted each one with the same quiet ruthlessness Christopher once used to hide his lies. There was nothing left to say to the woman who laughed in the background while my life unraveled. 6 weeks later, I stood in a courtroom painted in solemn browns and muted grays as Ryan read the final decree. Christopher appeared through a grainy video feed, his orange jumpsuit wrinkled, his face hollowed by sleepless nights and shrinking illusions. His lawyer, a tired public defender, had advised him to surrender to the inevitable. He did. He offered no resistance, no last-ditch speech. Just silence, his eyes lowered. The judgment mirrored Ashley's projections exactly. I kept the house overlooking the sea, the retirement I'd built, the inheritance Uncle Charles had entrusted to me, and yes, even the car. Christopher walked away with nothing but a growing pile of legal troubles and a debt to the federal government that would tether him for years like an invisible chain. The defendant forfeits all claims to marital assets due to fraudulent attempts to access protected funds, the Ryan read without emotion. This divorce is granted irrevocably. All financial provisions are final and not subject to renegotiation. It was done. The next morning, the doorbell echoed through the quiet of my home. A courier handed me a thick envelope bearing the seal of Banco Gravora Privado. Inside, a note in Sandra's familiar handwriting. All security protocols have been restored. Your inheritance remains fully protected and continues to generate interest. Your uncle would be proud. I smiled, a quiet, private smile. Uncle Charles had warned me, long ago, of the wolves in disguise, the ones who come bearing promises, wearing charm like a second skin. I had listened. And now, because of his foresight, I had not been devoured. As I stepped into the morning sun outside the courthouse, my phone buzzed. Samantha. Saw the article. 28 months in prison? Are you okay? I tapped out my reply with a grin. I've never been better. Later that day, I met with Sandra in her office to talk strategy. The inheritance, merged with my share of what was once ours, gave me more than just financial stability, it gave me options. Early retirement was within reach. So was opening the accounting firm I'd once dared only to dream about. Before I left, Sandra handed me a sealed envelope. Your uncle instructed us to deliver this once all legal matters were resolved. The handwriting on the letter was unmistakable, strong and deliberate, just like him. Jessica. If you are reading this, it means someone tried to take what was never theirs to claim. I hope the safeguards I left behind served you well. But more importantly, I hope you now understand this: true wealth is inner peace. And that, you have earned. Use what remains to build something worthy. Build something that is yours. Charles. I tucked the letter into my purse, where I could keep it close. Uncle Charles had given me more than money. He had passed down a legacy of clarity, self-worth, and the kind of strength that doesn't shatter when tested, it hardens, sharpens, survives. That evening, I drove home in silence. There was no music, just the hum of the tires and the rhythm of a life being reclaimed. I thought of the woman I was just months ago, a woman who thought loyalty meant sacrifice, who mistook manipulation for love. That version of me had been buried, one betrayal at a time. And in her place stood someone new. Someone stronger. Someone dangerous to those who mistook her kindness for fragility. Christopher's betrayal had been a wound, but also a purge. A violent shedding. It hurt, yes. But in its aftermath, I found something fierce and beautiful. Freedom. For the first time in years, I was the one holding the pen, and the future was a blank page. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you reflect on justice, resilience, or the quiet triumph of reclaiming what was yours, I invite you to stay. Here, you'll find more stories of transformation, a betrayal turned into strength, and endings that taste like dark redemption. Subscribe and walk with me through what comes next. Until the next story.